My name is Jonas Elrod. I was born 37 years ago in a small God-fearing town out of Georgia. One day, out of nowhere, something very strange happened to me.
Doesn't sound like schizophrenia. He doesn't have a mood disorder.
We have excluded potential causes of abnormalities such as a brain tumor.
Overnight, I started to see things that most people couldn't see. Angels and spirits and demons. I could see it everywhere. And I'm trying to find out why this happened to me.
He's asked me not to talk to anyone about this.
I mean, it's sensory overload, essentially, is what it is at times. This gift, this curse, this gift curse.
Why was he just one average Joe guy one day, and then all of a sudden, he sees things, he sees things.
Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, irrational seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into controversial topics that some may call new age or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will hopefully encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers.
Cat, wake up, Cat, wake up, we're recording, Cat.
Well, what time is it? I need my coffee. Enough of that joke. This episode, we're talking about a documentary called Wake Up, hence the joke, by Jonas Elrod.
She sure knows how to shoot down my dad jokes. I'm deep down at heart, I am a dad. Yeah. I'm probably my dad, actually. Yeah, we're going to talk about this documentary by a guy called Jonas Elrod, called Wake Up. It's a story of an arguably normal man who suddenly started seeing angels and demons, and his journey to try and understand this experience.
Perfectly normal experience, right? Maybe not. I first heard about this story on the Oprah Winfrey podcast.
I didn't even know she had a podcast.
Yep, I think it's called Oprah's Superstar Conversations or Super Soul Conversations. Very, very good. And yeah, I guess I was really captivated by Jonas's story because he didn't seem like the kind of person who would normally experience these otherworldly
he did just seem like a normal guy.
He did, very much. Anyway, so I watched the documentary, and I think that's when I sent you a text.
Yeah, you sent me a text saying, I watched this and it made me wonder what I would think or do if one of my friends told me that they had started seeing shit. Right. And I text you back and saying, what if it wasn't just one of your friends? What if it was me?
And then I went silent.
No, I think you said if it was you, I'd take it even more seriously.
Yes, again, you kind of take the skeptic a bit more seriously. And similarly with this Jonas story, I think that's what attracted me to it.
It's really interesting because I think this is a position that skeptics find ourselves in quite often, where we're hearing about someone's experience and we don't necessarily want to say, I don't think you had the experience you did, because often we do think they had that experience, but we're just questioning their interpretation of the experience. Right. So yeah, I'm sure you did see something in the woods, but was it really Bigfoot? Yeah,
or a figment of your vast imagination.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, and going into this documentary, I'm thinking, to be honest, I'm not expecting much. I'm not expecting it to be crap, because otherwise you wouldn't have sent it to me. But I'm thinking, I've seen a lot of this stuff. People claim to see stuff all the time. Why should I take this guy seriously? I'm immediately, my defenses are up, let's just say.
For sure.
So there's the blurb from IMDb, which is my first intro into it, goes something like this. Jonas Elrod was leading an ordinary life until he woke up one day to a totally new reality. The documentary follows this fascinating story of an average guy who inexplicably developed the ability to access other dimensions. It's a good intro, right?
Absolutely. And so when you start watching this film, you are hit with some pretty interesting statistics, such as 71% of Americans believe angels exist.
There's no sources for these, I don't think. Are there sources?
Interesting. I didn't see any, obviously, no. You've got 59% believe in demons, and
Wow.
68% believe their soul survives death.
That doesn't surprise me so much. In fact, I'd expect that to be higher. I think everyone I speak to who's not a skeptic, a lot of people believe in souls,
Right.
for starters. And if you believe in souls, you probably believe they're immortal, right? There's not many people who think, yeah, souls exist, but when I die, they disappear.
Right, yeah. They just come with me for the ride. What would be the point?
What I found odd about that is, like, 71% of Americans believe angels really exist. Jonas sees angels. What? But he's like, this whole documentary is like, oh, I'm so special.
Yeah.
Okay. From my perception, oh, I'm so special. I see angels and demons. But if 71% of Americans also see angels and demons, that's not that impressive.
I would say that these stats were put in there to help people feel like they weren't alone if they are seeing them. But then there's just this other thing of, you might believe in these things, but who sees them?
But not actually see them. Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure. I mean, those are some of our ideas of why these stats were put in, but it definitely gets your attention.
Well, there's this classic thing, they call it the argument ad populum, which is like when you're saying, I have this amazing new product, you should buy it. Loads and loads of other people have bought it.
Right.
You see it on signs all over the place. So near where we live, there's a little bit of a walk, like a nice trail we can walk up. And there's a sign saying, take your litter home, others do.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that is because if you know other people do it, you're more likely to do it yourself. And it works with beliefs as well.
Right.
If you know lots of people believe something, you're more likely to believe it. It feels like it has extra authority, which isn't crazy. Obviously, things that are... Popularity is a good index to like consider when you're thinking about an idea. But using it as like your only argument, that would be like an argument ad populum.
Sure.
Like, just because everyone believes something doesn't mean it's true, obviously. Just because 71% of Americans believe angels are visiting them or whatever bullshit doesn't mean it's true.
Definitely made me think I should be in that 71%. That's just how I work. Anyway, Jonas dives straight into his story. So basically, like you said, overnight, he could see these spirits. And he also mentions at the start that he was told by these spirits to expose what was happening to him. And that was, I guess, his loose reasoning for making the film. I should note here that Jonas is a filmmaker. I haven't found a whole lot of information about Jonas himself, but again, this is I think we could both agree that it's a pretty well-produced film.
Yeah.
And this wasn't his first time around the block.
Oh, for sure. The sound design is amazing.
Yeah.
I really like whenever he's saying something that, like, he's having a revelation or talking about something emotional, you feel that lifting of the... I'm not a musician, I don't know what it's called, but it's probably changing to a certain key that makes you feel like, ooh, like that sort of whooshy sound. And it's all classical music, but kind of slightly arty.
Yeah.
It's very well put together. And it's also beautifully filmed.
Yes. And even special effects that make you think, oh, that's what Jonas is seeing.
Yeah, I'm seeing what he's seeing, man.
And so, yeah, he was in a hotel room when it happened, and it just kind of came out of the blue. And my big question was, is he on drugs? Was he on drugs? And the big thing is, no, he wasn't. It really was just out of the blue. And then you've got an introduction to his girlfriend, Mara. I think they kept saying Mara.
Yeah, I think that's just the American pronunciation of Mara.
Yeah. And she's very much a big part of this film from the start. And she is the skeptic voice in the film.
Or is she?
Well, that's a good point.
We'll get into that later.
You're skeptical about skepticism.
I am.
And she explains how she basically thinks, or at least thought he might be schizophrenic, and how hard it was for her. I think there was a lot of that, like, oh, poor me, the girlfriend who has to stick by my crazy man.
It would be hard, but one of the things that I sort of put together, actually it's the second time I watched this through, because I do my research, I'm diligent, I watched it twice. I realised, I got the impression that they were like a couple, and then he suddenly started seeing this stuff. And she was like, how do we deal with this?
Wrong.
That's not true at all. Yeah, exactly. On the day they met, he had an episode where he started seeing stuff because they met at his friend's funeral.
He'd already been seeing these for quite a while beforehand.
Yeah, so she got together with this guy, knowing that he was a Fruit Loop.
Yeah. Did take him a while to tell her.
Yeah, I guess. But she might have noticed him thrashing around and shouting about angels and demons at the funeral.
It's possible.
Like, that's the first time you meet, you're like, oh, just going to the funeral of my friend, mourning and stuff. And you see this hottie sitting over there. And then the hottie starts like waving his arms around and shouting about God.
And she does say, as soon as she saw him thrashing around, she was attracted to him. I don't know. Again, it's a wise but skeptical approach. Anyway, we see Jonas go to a doctor's office, Dr. Richard A. Friedman, professor of clinical psychiatry. And Jonas starts describing some blue stuff above the doctor's head. I've made a note here in my notes. Blue is a good aura color.
Oh.
Well, but it's funny. You should listen to the Oprah interview because she does ask, what color is my aura, basically, and he's like, yeah, it's like purple. It looks really nice. That was not word for word, but that's the effect. And I imagine
that's interesting though, the way that you said that. I know you're not quoting word for word, but when the psychiatrist says, can you see anything in the room?
Yeah.
And he says, I see something behind you, and
Yes.
the psychiatrist says, describe it please, he gets super vague, don't you think?
Well, yes, he said that there's a woman standing behind him. I got that much.
Eventually he says a woman,
it
but
did take a while.
Like if I asked you to describe a woman standing there, you'd be like, oh, she's 5'4", she's got blonde hair. Like you could give me more details.
That's because you're thinking about if we saw a physical woman. I feel like if you saw something, I mean, I'm imagining what Jonas is seeing, and it's probably like this gaseous thing, and it's probably shifting a bit.
Okay.
In the same way that that thing you do if you turn down as you do, but, if you turn down the lights and you look at somebody's face for a long time, it starts to shift.
Yeah.
Our eyes play tricks on us, and it's not static. It's not like observing the physical world. So I almost feel, even though I have not experienced this myself, I feel Jonas's pain in trying to describe these things.
I don't know. I just thought, to me, he came across as really vague and cagey when asked about specifics of what he was seeing.
That's because they are unspecific things.
Yeah, I guess. But also I thought, did he not know that the psychiatrist was going to ask this question?
Sure.
If he knew, then you would have thought he'd be more prepared? Or, I don't know, the whole thing seemed a bit...
The way Jonas the way he shows his emotions in this moment makes me not question that he was seeing something. But we will get to the opinions. But anyway, even in that scene, you see Jonas getting pretty emotional about what he's seeing. And there's this great bit of conversation between them. The doctor says, "Is this real?" And Jonas says, "You tell me." And that just got me, because that is probably what somebody would be thinking in this time. If you were seeing something, there are two options. Either it's all in my head, or this is actually there.
Yeah.
And it seemed like Jonas was genuinely asking that question. Okay, so the other thing, though, is he's describing these geometric figures, angels, and he does say that angels basically look like how they look in books, which makes me, again, question the source of these forms, because naturally, if it was something that I couldn't explain, maybe I would be more prone to believe that it was real. In the same way that if I have a dream, I'm always surprised by a dream where I'm like, oh, I don't know where that came from. Yeah. I've never seen a place like that before. And not saying there's anything special about that. It just always seems less, it seems more interesting than something that, oh yeah, I read about tigers in a book that day. Of course I had a dream about a tiger. So there's that. He goes home to his parents, and speaking of angels, these are very Southern Christian down-to-earth folk. The dad says, maybe God's trying to save you.
He says maybe you're one of God's chosen people or
something? Yeah, and
something
he wants you to teach others.
Oh, yeah, you're right. He says maybe this is some kind of message that you need to be saved. You need to go back to church and get more involved.
Naturally. Of course Dad would say that.
Unsurprising advice from the evangelical father.
Yeah.
It's probably his advice to everything. He's like, oh, Dad, my computer crashed. He's probably, that's a sign you need to get saved, son.
But yeah, the parents didn't seem to be super surprised.
No,
I guess.
I thought,
or worried,
a
even.
massive underreaction.
Yes.
I can't imagine what my parents would say if I came.
I think mine would be
that.
very upset. And then he goes to see this acupuncturist or healer guy, Abdi Asadi, who was very nonchalant, even more so than the parents. He believes that this stuff is real and that most of us just can't access it. And he's very sure about this. Jonas then goes to Italy. So he's really taking this seriously and traveling around the world.
Well, it's kind of like a classic way to do a documentary, like one of those participatory documentaries, like a Michael Moore documentary.
Yes.
Like, I never cared about issue X, and then issue X affected my life. Now I'm going on a journey all around the world to talk to experts and find out what's really going on. This is like the arc of a classic documentary thing, and this is very much it's very skillfully put together. He goes and visits all these people, and you get taken on an emotional journey as you learn more about all these people and these perspectives.
And it says something about the authority of the people he speaks to if they come from foreign fields. You know, there was something about that, like, he's gone to Italy. And anyway, so the guy he sees in Italy is Umberto di Grazia, I think, who photographs these spirits. And that's his job. This is where my skepticism finally kicked in.
Oh, really?
So Jonas sits in a darkened room, and you kind of see the kind of whatever cameras, infrared cameras showing that, you know, it looks very woo-woo, scary. And then the photos of what happened in the room get processed. And there's a weird moment where Jonas sees like one of the raw photos, which looks like a very pixelated, strange photo. And then they said, oh yeah, we're going to do some processing. And we're going to work on it. It's like, what in Photoshop?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to start doctoring it and adding spirits? Well, that's kind of what I would do. But so you see some things, most of them are just quite blurry.
It's just kind of shapes, isn't it? It's like kind of quite bright colours against a black background, and there's kind of shapes of
almost like blurs.
Red and yellow and blue blurs. I guess it's taking photos of some kind of electromagnetism, or it might just be heat, it might be both. It's something like that. Yeah. Or spirits, yeah, of course.
And then there's this one bit where somebody in the room tells Jonas to like take a deep breath, prepare himself. And they showed a very scary face. It wasn't really scary. It looked like a bit like an angry monkey face.
Oh, really? I thought it looked kind of like a grey alien.
Okay.
With the big eyes?
Yes, they definitely seem to have that kind of pointy characteristic.
But then also a scary mouth?
Yeah. Well, it was grinning. I mean, it could have been smiling. Anyway,
he was scared.
Jonas was shitting it then. Like, he really, again, that didn't seem like fake fear. That seemed real. The only thing that I started to get a bit questionable about this was that was meant to be directly in front of Jonas. Why didn't Jonas see it when he was in the room?
He did say, I've seen something like this.
Before. Yeah, because, you know, it was quite a generic face. And if you thought you were seeing faces, of course you would see something like that at some point. But the fact that he didn't see it in the room with him.
Yeah, that's weird. I was thinking this is at the point in the movie where I watch a lot of found footage horror movies. Okay. I'm kind of addicted to them, actually. Even bad ones I'll watch anyway. And this is how they always start. Like, they establish the characters, you get to know the characters and to like them and be invested in them as characters. And then something happens, and it could maybe be supernatural, but maybe not. And that's like a couple of beats of the movie. And then it goes on a bit further, and something definitely supernatural is happening now. And you're like, oh, it's starting to get spooky. This is what I like. And then you're like, is the supernatural stuff bad or good? Is it bad or good? And the characters talk about it a bit. And then something really bad happens, just like that scary photo of the scary demon face. And then from there on, the movie takes off and becomes like a proper horror. So it's like, this is all set up. Is this just going to be a horror movie?
It's that was the peak moment for that.
That's the moment where it could have become just a found footage horror movie. But instead, it goes back to him talking to more researchers.
Yes. And one of the first places he goes was to... Actually, he spoke to... It's going to be a long pause here.
That's okay.
You've made notes that I didn't put down, but that's fine. So I'm just going to skip ahead to Jay-Z Night School. Okay, so then he goes to Jay-Z Night School. And it's funny, I had come across this woman when I was researching mediumship.
This woman and her friend Rantha, the million-year-old spirit.
Yes,
or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Didn't appeal to me as much as some of the other mediums, I know, but she has a school where it's
cult.
It was a lovely well, actually Jonas refers to it as a Harry Potter school. So even he, again, showing his skepticism, real or fake. Think blindfolded archery. We saw a clip of everyone but Jonas dancing. You know, like at the beginning, everyone's kind of doing the spiritual thing. And I just remember thinking, yeah, if I was there, I'd definitely be sat there with Jonas being like, what the hell did we get ourselves into?
I don't say the word cult lightly. I didn't look this institution up in my big book of cults.
Okay.
I will do that. Maybe I'll tweet about it. If you follow us on Twitter, I'll check in the big book of cults, and if it's in there, I'll take a photo and put it on Twitter and Instagram. But I did have a bit of a Google, and it is well known as being a bit of a cult. There's a guy. There's an ex-member, Dave McCarthy, who says something along the lines of Jay-Z Knight uses fear to keep people on the cult. In fact, he had a direct quote. He says, "Unless students remain faithful to Ramtha, they will become prey of the lizard people."
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Not good at all. And we're going to find out more about the lizard people when we go and see David Icke.
Can't wait.
Because they're not good. Maybe that's what that face was supposed to be. The other thing that I found was an account from Glenn Cunningham, who is Jay-Z's former bodyguard. And he was staff at RSE, which is this, what does it stand for? RSE. I can't even remember. Anyway, that's the name of the school.
Yeah.
He said, basically, Ramtha isn't real. He's never seen her do anything supernatural. He never believed that Ramtha was real. And he remembers this horrible thing he recounts where this woman came to the school to get over her cancer, which is always like, oh God, don't say you can cure cancer. That's really upsetting. And in front of everyone, Ramtha hugged her and told her she was free of the disease.
Okay.
And the guy, Glenn Cunningham, said, this is in an interview I found with him online, I'll put it in the show notes, "The whole school is a lie and that woman is dead."
Oh.
Yeah. So we saw a really positive portrayal in this documentary of these people basically doing fun exercises to develop their intuition or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a really dark side to that whole organisation.
It's, it takes my theory of, well, if it isn't hurting anyone, what's the harm? And the thing is like, oh, but there is potential for harm. There you go. Then we went to another cult. No, we didn't. We went to a Buddhist monastery. So it was interesting hearing what some of the people there were saying. According to one nun there, you'd say, we're heading towards a major phase shift. So I think words like that were probably quite encouraging. They weren't giving explanations as to what Jonas was saying, but for sure it was encouraging.
I was a bit surprised to hear that from a Buddhist.
Yeah.
Like the Buddhists that I've interacted with are kind of traditional. Like these seem more like hippie Buddhists.
Yeah.
But maybe the whole American Buddhist scene is a bit different. I don't know.
It's possible. Again, this particular person, I don't know if she was speaking for the whole lineage. It was more like, what would you tell these people without dismissing them, which I think is a very compassionate thing to do.
Yeah, I think if I went to my local Buddhist center and said I've been seeing angels and demons, they'd be like, go get some therapy.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know, like I really don't think that they'd be trying to answer it in that way, because I feel like I don't know, maybe I'm just obviously there's a selection bias, because the sort of Buddhists I interact with are going to be more rational, straightforward people, because that's what I'm looking for in any kind of Buddhist community. But I feel like, I mean, obviously they would tell you to meditate because that's their answer to everything. But I feel like they're using the Buddhist teachings to help them live their lives. They're not necessarily integrating all that kind of New Age stuff.
Well, yeah, they're not using it to explain things, even though plenty of lineages do.
Yeah.
Interesting you said that you would kind of get what you're looking for. And I think this is the case. I think in any case, almost accidentally, we get what we're looking for in these times. And if you really went there saying, I'm worried about this and I kind of don't want this, you'd probably be met with that answer of go and see somebody. Whereas I think these guys, I'm not saying this is what happened, but maybe it was clear that all they wanted was more encouraging.
Yeah, also they're doing a documentary, right? So maybe they interviewed loads of Buddhists and loads of them just said, oh, you sound mental, go get therapy. Yeah. And then this one woman was like, phase shift, and they're like, gold, let's put it in.
And interestingly, this is when you see Mara's true colours, because they're talking at breakfast or something, and one of the nuns says, and Mara said her name maybe, and she was like, oh, but in like Buddhist history, wasn't Mara the one who kind of like tempted the Buddha, and he was like a bad character, a temptress? And what the nun says, well, it was actually Mara who kind of kept saying to the Buddha, who are you? Yeah, to do this.
Think you could be enlightened?
And that's when Mara broke down, because she's like, that's what I keep saying to Jonas, and I think it was her like overwhelming, I'm trying to pick up on what emotion that was, but it almost seemed like some kind of like release and joy in a way, that it was confirmation that what Jonas was saying was real and that he was like this enlightened being, and all she was the doubting Thomas, as it were. And that's a Christian
It's so
reference.
interesting because I found that bit. I mean, obviously, this just shows our different perspectives. But I found that bit profoundly unconvincing because she says to the Buddhist, "I'm always nervous to tell a Buddhist my name."
Yes.
Because it's Mara.
Yeah.
And I know that Mara was the temptress of the Buddha. She says temptress.
Yeah.
And the Buddhist lady clarifies, actually, Mara was male in the myth.
Yeah.
And blah, 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 this stuff. And I'm just like, you're always worried to tell a Buddhist your name because you think that Mara is a temptress. How long would it take you to find out the truth by looking on Wikipedia? Less than 5 minutes? 2 minutes?
Most people...
It's her name. She's always worried. Every time she meets a Buddhist... she's worried about
By
it.
always, could have been like once or twice.
Still.
Why would she lie about that?
If she's genuinely worried about it, I don't know.
Why else would she have said it?
I have no idea, but isn't that bizarre? If you think your name means something really bad to a massive community of people, you don't take a moment.
Well, she's probably not thinking
look
about it
into
too seriously. Because again, she didn't come from a Buddhist background. She's probably just saying it quite
Maybe.
flippantly.
I just thought that was so weird. I can't imagine if Rebecca was like a horrible, bad character in some religion, I'd want to know what the details
So
were.
you're imagining that scene was set up and they got the nun to say that?
I have no idea. I think the nun I think the nun was completely sincere.
Right.
But I just think it's odd that if you thought, and she says always, okay, this could have been hyperbole, but she says, I always worry about telling a Buddhist my name. Like, how many interactions with Buddhists do you have?
Probably not that many.
Then why do you always worry? Like,
because hyperbole.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I don't know,
Occam's razor, I believe Mara, she really did cry. And seemed to be full of emotion at that point.
But wouldn't you look it up?
You know, I've always worried talking I'm trying to think of another religion and my mind's gone
I'm
blank.
actually thinking I don't know anything about Rebecca in the Bible, so this is all like...
Oh my God, you should look her up, man. She's like the temptress.
Maybe when I'm saying this, but at the time I was just like, what, are you crazy? She's like, you're planning to go and stay at this Buddhist retreat. You're worrying about this.
I don't think she was worrying
about
about it. She just said it flippant, like making breakfast conversation, like, oh, Mara. I think it was like that. It was like, anyway,
Yeah,
we're
maybe.
getting
Okay.
on the Mara question. But anyway, so Mara has her drama queen moment. And finally, pretty much wrapping up, Jonas goes to a Native American sweat lodge, which was the bit that I think I wanted to do the most. I think it looked really fun.
We
And I
should
think
do that.
the people looked like they were having... Well, it's like they had a real community. Like,
Yeah.
I think I like those people the most. Anyway, can you remember much?
Although, do you think it's wise to take a baby into a sweat lodge?
Well, he didn't seem to be upset, did he?
I know.
And
but
also, how long? You probably wouldn't have him in there for that long.
I don't know. There was this. I don't know how old this child was. It was being carried. It was a very young child. Like, I don't know, maybe like less than 1 year old. I don't know anything about babies, but Jonas said, "Oh, are you going to take the kid in?" He's like, "Oh yeah, he's been in loads of times." And what?
He looked like a pretty happy kid.
Yeah.
But I was a bit.
It's a health and safety nightmare as well.
Again, I don't think I could spend very long in a sweat lodge, but you're right. I would be interested in it. I can't remember, but I don't think Jonas really had any more revelations at this point.
Not in the sweat lodge. No.
No. I think the bit, it kind of ended in a way that left me still questioning, like, what is this real conclusion? Other than, oh, me and Mara are in a really happy relationship. I think that kind of kept coming up, and it didn't seem to be too obviously related to what Jonas was trying to do. But did you feel like that was, again, this is my perception of what was the conclusion here? Was it to do with their relationship?
I think, well, there was a point where that Abdi guy, the acupuncturist,
Yes.
said, he was like, what can I do? What spiritual work can I do to integrate this and to understand it better? And he said the best work that you can do is working on your relationship with your partner, which I think is really good advice.
Probably the most sound advice in the whole...
Yeah. So I do think like the story of their relationship, although I would have liked it fleshed out a bit more, because I was having to guess stuff and put stuff together in a way that was kind of weird.
Sure.
Like the actual the timeline of when they got together, that was something
Yes.
I only figured out the second watch, because I was like, oh, I see, they actually met at the funeral. Because that's the other thing that runs throughout, is that he, right at the beginning when he starts seeing stuff, shortly after that his best friend dies.
Yes.
So this whole thing is sort of tinged with references to his best friend who died and his grief about that, and how also Mara knew the friend. That's why they were both at the funeral.
Yes.
So there's a connection there, and that's kind of being worked throughout the course of the movie,
Yeah.
which is, depending on how sincere you think he is either really kind of touching and beautiful or really exploitative.
Well, I don't know. My thing is, one thing that gives it kind of validity is there is no clear story. Like the fact that it started happening before the friend died. It's not like this was triggered by that. There isn't really anything story-worthy, if I'm quite honest, about Jonas's story, other than the fact he's seeing shit.
He doesn't have any messages from these entities that he's seeing apart from
Share the message, yeah.
But they don't. It's weird because he talks about them communicating with him, and the only thing he tells us that they say is to share them.
Yeah,
but
like that
presumably
he's
they're
seeing
saying
them.
other things.
Surely you would ask them.
Yeah, that's never clarified. Nothing's really clarified. It's just sort of like a general talking around the subject, I guess.
Yeah. So how did you feel after watching the film?
I enjoyed it. It's a very well made film,
and
and
it's a story.
it's well put together. It lacks a bit in narrative arc because you're all excited about it becoming, or at least from my experience, you're all excited about it becoming a found footage horror movie, and then it doesn't. You're like, well, where's that demon that you showed me at the beginning? I want him to come back, and maybe you could add some effects, and Jonas could get possessed.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when he goes on that vision quest with the Native American guy, that would be a great moment for the demon to come back.
And he'd have to like defeat him, and
exactly. So I was thinking of all sorts of stuff they could have done narrative wise that would have made it a bit more exciting. Definitely. And then all the experts he talks to, when they're on the screen and they're talking, you're like, oh, this guy's got something to say. But when you actually start thinking back on it, what they say isn't very much. It's all very vague. And like occasionally they'll get out something that looks kind of science-y, but isn't actually a scientific piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Or they'll misuse it. Like they have like some guy just taking those photos that are of heat or electromagnetism, saying this is spirits, and there's another guy who's like, oh, we've got all this random number generator and we've noticed that it, I mean,
it didn't make any sense.
That's just nonsense. That's like if you guys remember us talking about ley lines, it's the same thing. Like if you have a big enough collection of data, you see anomalies,
right?
That's what happens. That's not surprising. So like you sort of put it all together and it seems like, oh, this is quite substantial, and you're almost thinking of all these different encounters with the different people as evidence. But then when you look at them one by one, you're like, that's not evidence for anything.
Right.
At least that was my experience. So I was left feeling a bit like, where's the meat of this thing?
Yeah, and the only like medical doctor is from the very, very start, and that's like it's like a minute long clip.
Oh yeah, that's dismissed so quickly. The idea that he might have some kind of mental illness.
Yeah.
It's like this one doctor saying, well, he doesn't seem to be schizophrenic.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with you.
Angels must be real.
But this is the other thing, like, and I could see it from maybe Jonas's point of view, that must be a frustrating thing to hear. If you're told, well, this isn't negatively affecting you too much in day-to-day life, so we're not going to worry about your psychological health too much. Also, we don't see anything physiologically or neurologically wrong with you. So go on your merry way. What do you do with that? And I'm sure that happens to people a hell of a lot. I've got friends who see, not stuff, but like, it's that idea of, energy fields and things like that. If it's not affecting you negatively, but you're still like wondering about what it is, I mean, what do you do with that? Of course you're going to go to these guys who confirm what you're seeing and maybe tell you something that is soothing.
So it sounds like when you finished watching the documentary, you were feeling a little bit skeptical.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, I have no doubt that Jonas is seeing what he's seeing, even with the kind of filmmaker, and partly because he hasn't really in a big way tried to monetize this. I mean, you can pay a few quid to watch the film, but it doesn't seem to be a big deal. He's not telling people how to see their own spirits, I don't think.
He's not selling like magic spirit seeing glasses or anything.
Exactly.
Although, opportunity there.
And I didn't doubt the reality of the emotions from Jonas or Mara throughout the film. But what's causing this? Do I think it's actual things? Is he really seeing things that we're all missing? I don't know.
So I had two voices in my head whilst I watched this film. And one of the voices was just saying, this guy is a fraud. He's a charlatan. He's trying to make money. and he's exploiting the death of his friend to do so, and this is not a cool dude. And then the other voice in my head is saying, no, he's having real experiences, but there's something a little bit he's got a mental health issue of some sort, not necessarily a serious one, but there's something going on. So I don't know, should we start with the idea that he's a fraud? I'll tell you,
please tell me.
I mean, okay. So there's the element of the fact that he is a filmmaker, right? And he's putting together a story, and he's putting it together very skillfully. Okay, so filmmakers can also see angels and demons, but I just think that's an interesting thing to consider when we look at this. When we look at this text, this movie, it's been crafted by someone who knows what they're doing. It's not just some. When you watch the movie, you think, oh, this is just some dude, and look, there he is in his pajama trousers, and they're a bit ratty at the bottom, and he's, he's just trying to get by.
Look how real he is.
Yeah, exactly. He's so real, and now he's making a movie about his experience. But that's not the case. The case is that this guy has been making films for ages. He's relatively successful, and like all filmmakers, I'm sure, is looking for an opportunity for his big hit.
Yeah.
So there's that. On his IMDb profile, it says about him, Jonas Elrod is a southern film writer and director who grew up in Georgia with a deep appreciation for story as a means for change. He fell in love with stories told on porches late at night of fallen heroes, misfit love and spiritual redemption. His appreciation for personal truth and deeper meaning has been a compass for his fiction and non-fiction work. So this is a storyteller.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean he's a charlatan, but it means he can put together a good story. And he's always been interested in these themes. So another way the film is presented sort of gives you the impression that like this just happened out of nowhere. He was just a normal guy, and then suddenly he started seeing angels and demons and blah, blah, blah. That's not true. He was spiritual as a child.
Oh, come on. He was raised Christian.
His parents said that they thought he might become a minister.
Okay, that's true.
That's quite extreme. And lots of people are raised Christian and they don't get that said about them. So the other thing that I thought was really dodgy was the way they played just the language I'm using is trying to influence you. Mara, right? She's a skeptic. They refer to her several times as a skeptic. Mara is not a skeptic. Did you think she was a skeptic?
I think she was skeptical.
In the sense of a skeptic like I am?
No, not in like a, I'm going to try and get to the bottom of this kind of skeptic.
No, she was just, in fact, she says at one point something along the lines of, I'm not doubting that you're having that these experiences are happening, that you're having them. I don't know if they're good or bad though. That's what I'm worried about.
Right.
She says something like, so that's not skepticism as I understand it.
And her fear at times made me think, she thinks it's real. Like there is something either good or bad, like you said. And maybe the reason why she had this kind of like relief moment with the Buddhists was because if this guy was like Buddha, she doesn't have to be scared because it's like he's like Christ now. And all she is doubting Thomas. And I'm mapping it onto Christianity because I believe that she is also a Christian child.
Yeah. So this is not a skeptic as in someone being like, oh, let's look for rational scientific explanations.
Yeah.
This is a skeptic in the colloquial sense as in, oh, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, which it scares me.
You know, you don't expect everyone to be a skeptic, but the way that is a very nice device to use as a filmmaker to have someone voicing the audience's doubts.
Oh, yeah.
And by having a character who voices the audience doubts, you sort of control and shape their doubts. Mm-hmm. So you say, it's okay to be skeptical. Mara's skeptical. Look at her being skeptical. This is the way you should be skeptical about this. Yeah. Not in the sort of way like, wait a minute, why didn't he go to another psychiatrist? Why did he only go to one psychiatrist?
Yeah.
Why is there this like weird moment with the psychiatrist where he's like, it's not a mood disorder, it's not schizophrenia, and you're not on drugs. And they suddenly cut to him going, well, it must be not the psychiatrist.
Better go to an acupuncturist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like if you rule out those three things, then angels must exist. There's a couple of things just like the way it's put together. And also, like I was saying, there's all this different, basically they just throw lots of shit at the wall. Like they've got the acupuncturist, they've got the Global Consciousness Project guy, they've got the guy with the photos. It's like any interpretation that you might have as a viewer, you'll find it there.
Oh, yeah. It's like, and also there's that thing of, if you believe in one of these things, you're likely to be at least interested in the others. Yeah. So for me, as somebody who like just loves learning more about these ways of seeing the world, it was juicy. It was like, oh, and how can this all link together, proving it's all true even more. Like that, you can see how people's cogs in their heads would be turning in that direction.
It's almost like if you I can't think of a good analogy, but if you don't need to present an argument or evidence, all you need to do is put enough stuff out there that is interesting and like will pique people's interest and get them excited, and then the viewer will naturally push that together into this idea that he's legit.
Yes, and maybe even form their own conclusions. And it'd be very interesting to see like comments for this and what other people are sort of concluding.
Yeah, I did look at a couple on the YouTube channel where they have his trailer, and it's a real mix. I'd say it's probably about 50-50.
Oh, interesting.
A couple of people saying, "Oh, I think it's more convincing because he's not sure about it and because he has a skeptical girlfriend." I'm like, well, that's that's exactly how I do it if I was a filmmaker. So I don't find that super convincing. Apart from to say if that's what he did, then it worked.
Yeah.
The other thing is you were saying like he's not making money off this, and that might be true, but I mean he's on the Oprah Winfrey podcast.
Yeah.
So this is his first sort of spiritual product.
Yeah.
But he has gone on. He's got a show now, hasn't he? I can't remember what it's called. It's called like it's where he gives spiritual counsel to people.
Oh fuck, I didn't know that.
It's on the Oprah network.
Oh no way!
Yeah.
How funny. So he has like
he's used it as a
capitalised on it.
platform
Yeah,
to do other
fair
stuff, which is nice. And this DVD was released by Beyond Worlds, which is the same people who did The Secret.
Okay.
And What the Bleep Do We Know, which maybe we'll do as another
Some
episode.
of my favourite films.
Yeah. So he's coming into a marketplace with a product.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think he's a bad guy. Like,
right.
I think like he was a melodramatic, preachy kid. That's basically what his parents say. His parents massive underreaction when he tells them. Maybe because he's saying weird shit all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but he's more interested in Christianity than is usual. They say, oh, he might become a preacher. He seems to be really into this God stuff. So he's a spiritual guy. He's not a normal guy who suddenly starts having a spiritual experience. He's someone who's been spiritual his whole life.
Right. So his brain could have been primed to see these things.
Yeah, that's possible. So, and then he starts making his money as a filmmaker. He starts his career as a filmmaker, and he has this interest in spiritual topics, and he has real talent as a filmmaker, is obvious from there. But he's still little known after 10 years in the industry. And then his friend dies, and it really shakes him, and he starts thinking about all the spiritual stuff again, but he's not so connected. He says at one point in the documentary, like, the Christian stuff falls off.
It definitely had.
Yeah.
He said that to Oprah as well.
So he has a more vague sort of spirituality going on, and he wants to make a documentary about his experience with spirituality. Perfect. He is a spiritual person. He's always been interested in this. He's just gone through this traumatic loss. He decides to make this documentary about spirituality, and it'll give him a chance to exercise all those muscles as a preacher that his parents, noticed in him so young. But he knows how modern documentaries work. He needs a hook.
Yeah.
Right? He needs to make it personal. You have to go on a personal journey. That's what people like. And so he says he can see some shit and that things are talking to him. And they're things that he thinks are true anyway because he believes angels and demons exist. So it's not like a super lie, just a little exaggeration. Maybe he can even see them in his mind's eye. So saying that he sees them isn't a complete lie. You can see how he could kind of convince himself that it might be, and then he uses all his storytelling expertise to put it together, to craft it into this documentary that hits the beats that he knows the audience will love. And it offers him comfort, which it keeps returning to throughout the course of the documentary, how almost everyone he talks to says, oh, this makes me feel better because I know my soul will survive death. Makes him feel better because he knows his friend who died. And it's offering the audience, it's a gift to the audience because it's offering them the evidence that they need, that the souls. So in a way, it's like a lie that tells a greater truth. You can see how that would work through in his head. And he uses that documentary as a platform to launch a career as a spiritual celebrity. That's the next step. And whether that succeeds or not, I don't know, because I don't know how well his Oprah show is going. But when I watched it, I was like, one of the voices in my head was like, he's a charlatan. And that's the sort of the way I could see that unfolding. Yeah.
Do you believe that people see things?
Yeah.
Okay. So
definitely. I've seen things.
Okay. I haven't. And I still think that it's very, very, like, I still believe people even though I haven't.
Yeah.
In the same way that I believe that this could have all come together. I think it can all be true. I think it can be true that Jonas had this proclivity. He already wanted to believe these things.
Yeah.
So, of course, he's not going to dismiss something out of the corner of his eye like somebody else might. But it's just a really good coincidence. And I think there are lots of great coincidences in life. It's really convenient and I'm not being sarcastic, it really is convenient that he did start seeing things and maybe he wasn't doing so well as a filmmaker. And it's like, yes, this is my lucky break. I can turn my experience into this thing. It's not like I'm pretending to be a creative introvert. Like it's not for that reason. It's like something that is interesting you and it appeals to you on a deep level. And that's all you can think about. And that's all you want to talk about. Why not turn that into something that could actually benefit other people?
Yeah.
There's nothing charlatan about that. It's just somebody who is tying a lot of threads together in their life, making sense of something in their own way, and hopefully offering some kind of help to other people who are seeing things and can't explain them and would much prefer to think of it as a benevolent spirit than they are just fucking mad.
Well, that's if he's actually seeing something.
I think he is actually. That's the thing.
I think he could still be a good guy and not be seeing anything.
Fair enough.
And the story I just told about him,
it's interesting,
exaggerating, massaging the facts a little bit.
And it's true. People can lie to themselves. I find that very hard to believe. Again, it's like Occam's razor. That to me, that doesn't add up. But I'm fair enough. There are people out there who walk that thin line between lying to other people and lying to themselves. And yeah,
he sometimes strikes me like that. Not always,
fair
but
enough.
sometimes. There's another couple of moments I had which I felt a little bit staged. Like when he's like they have that argument. They're sitting outside at a cafe.
I mean, things like that could definitely have been thrown in for fun. Yeah.
That him and his girlfriend are having an argument about the thing, and he just gets irrationally angry out of nowhere, and she's wearing this really nice like dress and
over the
matching
top
jewelry,
dress.
like really over the top dress. Like I don't know, like she's doing a scene, and they're facing the camera. Everything.
Yeah.
There are moments.
Why
in it
would the
that felt
camera
very
have been
staged.
there? Of course, yeah.
But you have to stage stuff to make a documentary. That
you have to
doesn't
make a
mean
film. Yeah.
And so the other option is that he is seeing something.
Right.
And, well, from the other voice in my head, in my skeptical head, is like, okay, maybe he's not a charlatan. Maybe he is seeing something and he just has some kind of mental health issues. And the sort of the stuff that makes me think that story might be the true one is that he had a really traumatic, troubled youth.
Okay.
Like, he was adopted at age 7 by those evangelical parents. Right. Before that, I don't know exactly what the situation was with his dad, but they say he was a drug addict.
Oh,
that doesn't sound good. So we know that obviously kids who have lots of trauma young, especially in those very early years, are more likely to developing mental health stuff. And his dad, his adopted dad, the only dad we meet, I don't know why I even had to mention his dad in the documentary, says, this is a quote, he says of Jonas, he's got a lot on his plate. He always had a lot on his plate. Maybe it's too much to deal with. I just thought that is painting the portrait of obviously a loving father talking about his son in a way like he knows that this guy's
a little bit unstable, maybe
a little bit troubled.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's the interview with the psychiatrist where as a viewer you're sort of led to believe that he's been given a clean bill of psychological health. But as I said before, all he does is says it doesn't sound like schizophrenia, it's not a mood disorder, it's not a drug-induced state, he doesn't really fit neatly into any known psychiatric disorder. That's what the psychiatrist said. That's what every psychiatrist will say about everyone. No one fits neatly into a psychiatric disorder. Everyone's a little bit of something. Everyone's complicated. Everyone's personal. Everyone's got multiple things going on. You can't just say he's not any of these things, and so therefore angels and demons are real. That's in fact, it's kind of a classic logical fallacy. Sometimes when people do it for God, it's called the God of the gaps. Or my favourite is in Ancient Aliens. It's referred to as the did it fallacy because aliens did it.
Oh yeah.
So it's
like,
they can't have done this with just their bare hands.
Yeah, so
aliens they can't have done it
built
with a
the
machine.
pyramids.
Must be aliens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you rule out a couple of things, you can't just leap. You can't say it's not A, B, or C. Therefore, it must be Z. There are lots of other letters.
Yeah.
And there's also combinations of A, B, and C that it could actually make sense as. So I don't know. It's just this thing where you take this really complex issue with so many factors like human personality and mental illness, and then just propose the most simple solution that fulfills your narrative criteria.
That's really interesting. And that is what almost it's the first thing that's made me think back to your proposition that he's almost lying to himself about what he's seeing. Because we could do that. Like I can see how the mind, like a mixture between consciously desiring to see something, you get what you see kind of thing, and unconsciously creating that.
Yeah.
So I am starting to think that that is where this all gets a bit fuzzy, and where people who start almost wanting to hear voices maybe start hearing voices. I don't know. I can see how that could happen. What I would really like to know more about is the phenomenon of that. Like, what are doctors saying about people who say they see things, who have like definitely no, reason for it, talking about like making money or making a film. What's the explanation for a paranoid schizophrenic who is seeing things? And I don't think they're consciously wanting that, though.
No, I think so schizophrenics usually hear stuff instead of seeing stuff.
Fair enough. Which
is probably the reason why they rule out schizophrenia so early, because when I first watched this I was like, why are they saying he's definitely not schizophrenic after considering it for like no seconds? But actually it doesn't. From my brief reading of an intro to schizophrenia book as research for this podcast, I mean, they're right. It doesn't seem like a typical case of schizophrenia, although there are great tests you can do. For example, like if you ask a schizophrenic person to follow something with their eyes, like your finger in front of their eyes, left to right, their eyes, or a large percentage of schizophrenic people's eyes, will like jitter as they follow the object instead of doing it smoothly. It's just something about something they don't entirely understand schizophrenia, but something about that. So there's simple tests that they could have done. They don't need to just anyway. But the hallucination thing, there's a great book by Oliver Sacks called Hallucinations, and I'll put that in the show notes. And he sort of starts the whole book by saying everyone hallucinates all the time. We only see what we see clearly is like this tiny spot in the middle of our vision. And then because I think it's something to do with the eyes, and like you have more receptors right in the middle of your eyes or something. I mean, you can read the book and find out yourself. And everything else is a blur. Yeah. But our brains put it together into a nice image. When we move our eyes around, they're linking all these little images together. So hallucinations are something our brains do naturally. And when something goes a little bit wonky in the old brain, it just gets hyped up and you start seeing stuff. And some people do that all the time. Some people do it occasionally. Some people do it when they're tired or stressed. Yeah. Like I've had loads of hallucinations. I think it's just I have problems with sleep, so I'm tired all the time and stressed quite a lot of the time because I also have problems with anxiety. So hallucinations don't seem like, unless it's, and this is what most psychiatrists and therapists will tell you, unless it's distressing you, it's not really a problem. People hear things and see things all the time, and the only reason you would bother intervening is because it's causing problems.
And out of curiosity, there have been times when the hallucinations have or haven't bothered you?
Yeah, I mean, I went through a horrible period when I was really stressed. I was at university, and I was smoking a lot of weed, which probably didn't help. And I started seeing some really scary things, probably like what Jonas talks about when he's talking about seeing demons.
Right.
Just like creepy people moving in weird ways and shapes and stuff like that. And basically when my life got better, they went away.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you attribute that to
people hallucinate. It's a known phenomena. Like we've seen people hallucinating. We can put people on MRIs and see that people hallucinate. This is not.
And at the time,
there's no mystery to
what
it.
were you telling yourself?
Oh my God. Well, at the time, I was still very much like a kind of spiritual woo-y type person. So it really distressed me. Yeah. And that's what I worry about with Jonas. Like, he needs people around him who say, hey, wait a minute, mate.
Yeah.
Maybe those demons you're seeing that are freaking you out aren't real.
Yeah.
He doesn't, in this documentary, I don't know what it's like in real life, but in this documentary, he doesn't have anyone saying that.
Yeah.
The skeptical girlfriend, all she says is, oh, I'm worried.
Is it good or bad?
Yeah, no one's questioning the validity of what he's seeing, which is fine as long as he continues to see nice stuff.
It's almost like it's easier for certain people, especially at certain times in their life, to believe that it's a good thing and there's a higher purpose for seeing something than it would be to rest in the unknown. And that is huge, right? That's like a situation that so many people are in who have a spiritual belief or something that they can't prove, but they rest on the fact that it's easier to have that belief than to not have any.
Yeah, and this is what you're saying when you said like it's not very comforting for some psychiatrists to just say, oh, I don't know what it is, but don't worry about it.
People don't want I don't know, and that is a brain thing. We don't like uncertainty. We can't deal with that.
But the truth of our current state of science is we don't know a lot of stuff about the brain. We don't know why people are schizophrenic. I mean, we have some ideas. There are lots of actually really interesting hypotheses around it, but we don't know for sure how exactly it works. It's probably a combination of things. And like something as complicated as everything he's seeing and hearing and feeling as well, because he says he feels other people's emotions at one point. He's clearly having a very rich and intense sensory experience.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff is going on in his brain. And to pin it down and say it's this, this, and this, and giving him a diagnosis would be very, very difficult for anyone, especially just a doctor who sees him for like however long the course of that interview happened. And that guy is he writes columns in the New York Times and stuff. So he's not seeing this guy in the regular. This is not his therapist. This is not someone he knows. This is like a celebrity psychiatrist. And I don't doubt that he's a good psychiatrist, but it's like, how are you going to... And then the interview is cut, obviously, and edited. So I don't know, like, and then the thing about his friend dying, the fact that he keeps coming back to that, I just think that when he describes his episode at the funeral, to me that sounds a bit like a breakdown. Like he says to Rob's mum, Rob is his friend who dies at the funeral they're at, I'm really sorry that happened then, because it sort of interrupted your grief and you had to deal with me when it was your son's funeral.
See, I weirdly skipped all of that in my mind. I kind of, that didn't register. I didn't really...
That bit really stuck with me because because of the two voices in my head, right? The one who's saying he's a fraud is disgusted with him at that point. So I'm like, you fucked up this woman's son's funeral and made it all about you with your fucking nonsense. Yeah. And now you're coming back to interview her and put her in your movie and like capitalize on her grief. That's disgusting. And then the other part of me is like, oh my God, this poor guy, he's lost his best friend and he is genuinely horrified by what he did at the funeral and that he upset this woman. And, you know, like, so I don't know which is the truth of the matter. And, you know, spoiler alert, it's probably neither. It's probably somewhere in between. But yeah, I really remember that encounter. Yeah. Like, he's very, very distressed. Yeah. He does say, as you said earlier, that he has experiences before his friend dies. But to me, this seems like a key moment where everything kicks up for him. Yes, quite possibly. And I think part of his bringing that up so much is because, yes, it kind of links to Mara and it creates a bit more of a narrative to kind of hook it all on. But also it comes back to this meaning. Is like part of what Jonas seems to say is, even his friend dying was kind of a gift to him because he met Mara, which is like kind of weirdly narcissistic. But again, it's how do you make sense of a tragedy? Yeah. You try to say, okay, well, what good came out of this? Have you heard of this guy, Ernest Becker? Don't think so. He wrote, you love him. He's right up your alley. He wrote a book called The Denial of Death. Ooh. And it's basically about how religions form as a response to, like, we're the only, that we know of, the only mortal creatures that can understand that we are mortal, and that is very, very distressing to us. And so we create these elaborate stories, and not just stories about religion and stuff, but just projects that are supposed to transcend our mortal lives, because death is very, very frightening, very, very upsetting to us. So you can imagine someone who's a little bit unstable, and someone they love, he's been close to, it sounds like a childhood friend, very, very close friend, dies. You can see how that would tip you psychologically. I mean, that could tip me, to be honest. I think that's not like... hard to believe, And this, like you say, about creating meaning and making things work. There's so many things throughout the course of the movie. Like, Umberto says... Oh, interestingly, Umberto, the guy who takes the electromagnetic photos, he is listed as a researcher and psychic. That's the... his credits that come up on the screen when he's introduced. And what they don't mention, he's also a retired actor. He was in Barbarella. Oh my God. Isn't that amazing? That's bizarre. I mean, not that devalues his work as a researcher, but you might think that he was a scientist. Yeah. From the way he's presented on screen. He's not. He's a retired actor who was in Barbarella. Who's got other things to do. Yeah, I mean, he would... that makes sense because he's a filmmaker. Who's he going to know? He's going to know retired actors. Like, of course. But just an interesting note. Anyway, he says that it's great to know there's another reality apart from the official one. The acupuncturist says it shows you there's a different reality to punching the clock. The Native American guy says it shows you there's more than just work and family. Jonas says, I know there's more out there, a bigger picture. And the Sufi guy says it's not just about having a job and having a family. There's more to life. There's more. They're they're manufacturing meaning, which is what we as humans do. We're meaning-making machines. Yes. But... you can see how that doesn't necessarily mean that the meaning's actually real. Yeah. That you could create a story and you could kind of especially if you're having these experiences, these
Yeah.
strange lights. There's a moment where he's talking about what he sees, and he says, oh, it's all like geometric shapes and this odd geometry and like glowing forms, and it's all shifting. And then if I focus on it, it like resolves into being a person, which to me sounds a lot like you're seeing random shit, and then you're putting your lens of interpretation onto it, and you're like, oh, it's angels and demons, just like I was taught in church. What a surprise.
Yeah.
Like, you can see how mental illness could become part of a religious narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know, I think a lot of people, especially people who haven't experienced weird mental stuff like I have, and I, like in my family as well, there's mental illness in my family, they think that like being crazy is like a switch that just gets flicked on or off.
Right.
But I feel like it's kind of like when a moment of intense suffering provokes a bunch of symptoms,
Yeah.
and also all the sort of normal human personality stuff. There's all these interrelated personality traits and personal history and cognitive abnormalities, and it can just create what I guess is just an unhealthy mental environment or an abnormal mental environment.
Sure.
And our culture will say, well, that's crazy. But it's not a switch. It's more like just an accumulation of shit that's happening in your head. And I think I agree with Dr. Freeman. I don't think Jonas is schizophrenic. I don't think he's a bipolar, and I don't think he's on drugs. And I think the doctor agree with me, I don't think he's neurotypical.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if anything, that would have been possibly a more helpful route for this film to go down is, well, what are, not so much what are people seeing, but what makes this happen? And like, let's strip it away and make it less about you're either, you know, mad or crazy and all those words that we're hopefully not using so much anymore. And making it like, remembering that it is this sliding scale. It is a grey scale of no one has a normal mental state.
Yeah, exactly.
No one does. And it's like, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about how, I mean, that's where this could have gone, right? It's like, let's see how normal this actually is.
That would have been so good. Yeah, that would have been really interesting. If instead of just talking to that one psychiatrist, they're going to talk to loads and actually because there are people who've written about this. There's loads of people who've written about this. It's not hard to find. But I think we have such a stigma around, I mean, the very fact that we use the word crazy, we have this stigma about people who are experiencing mental illness, and we think they're different from us and they're other, and that there's something, you know, worrying about them. And Jonas says that, this really stuck with me. He says something along the lines of, the worst thing in the world that someone could say to me is, well, I think he believes it.
Oh.
He really doesn't. He would prefer you to think it's either completely for real, and he says, I prefer people to say, I just don't believe you, than to say, I think you believe it.
Oh, so that's kind of what I'm saying.
The two options that he wants you to have is he's a charlatan, he's just making it up, or it's completely real.
Oh, interesting.
Because either way, he's not crazy, because the idea of being crazy to him is super scary, which is understandable because that's what our culture portrays it as.
It's almost like the film was a way for him to express how he's not crazy.
Yeah, maybe. So like the whole thing, like the whole narrative, the whole movie and the whole story that he's put together in his head, it probably gives him comfort. It might even give other people comfort. Yeah. And it might have sustained him through that really intense time of grief. But it also makes it much harder for him to critically appraise it. So
I'm like, so what?
But no, like, what if his symptoms don't continue to be benign and comforting? What if they take a bad turn because they're untreated and they develop into something that's frightening and disruptive? Like, and then it'll be, realistically, I don't think he's going to have a friend around him who'll be able to say those words that he least wants to hear. You know, Jonas, I believe you believe what you're saying, but I think you might need some help.
I mean, I'd like to think that because naturally the mind is trying to seek comfort at some point, maybe that will be the thing he would need in order to be like, oh, this isn't a spiritual thing. Yeah. This is just a result of my brain states, you know? And maybe that's when he would find comfort in something else. Yeah. Again, it's like this seeking of comfort to me it's not the big bad.
I don't think it's bad to look for comfort. I think we all look for comfort. But I'm just worried about if what you turn to for comfort is a story which isn't true, then when that story falls apart, which it might well do because it's not true, you're going to be really screwed. Whereas if you found comfort in things that are true, and that's why I really like that acupuncturist saying you need to turn to your relationship. That's the important thing you need to cultivate.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Like that's real.
Yeah.
Mara is a real human person. I assume. I don't think she's been digitally edited. I'm not skeptical about the existence of his girlfriend. So I think turning to the people around us for comfort, and maybe to the natural world, and to, you know, the awe and wonder that we can feel when we look at amazing scientific discoveries.
I don't know why that's better.
Art, because it's real.
I don't know. I don't believe anything's real. But yes, only because what's the difference? If you can't be sure of what's... I personally don't think we can be sure of what's real. So all we can do with that is seek the most comforting thing. Something feels less comforting, back away from that. What's the harm?
I think like I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure it's entirely true in that I don't think you act that way, because we arrange to meet at a certain time and you don't just go, well, time isn't real.
No, of course not. But again, what's more comforting to me, to think that I have potentially let somebody down by not being there at a certain time, or is it more comforting to me to play the game?
Yeah, but if you were just like, if you were late by accident and you're like, oh, it would be more comforting to believe that actually time is subjective, so I'm just going to turn up whenever I like.
But that's making up a new belief.
Well, this is kind of making up new, but I guess he's relying on like the Christian symbology.
I don't think that's what it's saying. I mean,
he's got this whole like universe of seeing other dimensions that is completely unique to him.
Right, but this isn't like, I don't think he made up seeing things to fit into a previous belief. I think he's used his previous beliefs to justify why he's seeing things. And this is the thing. Like, all we're doing, this is kind of like my current worldview, is like we're perceiving things. Light and sound and touch and all of these things. And we've been told a story, and for most, we're agreeing with what that story is. You know, this is a table and it's made out of these atoms and rah, rah, rah. And that's the comforting story. When things start not fitting in that story, again, our human drive is to seek more comfort. Yeah. And if that means telling a new story, writing a Bible, it's all to do the same thing. It's all just try to make sense of things that we're perceiving.
Yeah.
But I don't think one's better or worse if they're both providing comfort.
I get what you're saying. I do think that like science is a method, but you know what I mean? Like, science is kind of like a story that we use to understand the world and explain the world. But I think how it differs from things like the Bible is that there is a process of testing and refining the conclusions it reaches. Like, that's what's so awesome about science. It's always up for debate and review.
That's true.
Religion isn't.
That's true.
And generally, I guess that's why I like art. Like, if someone said to me, I find it really comforting. In fact, I could say this to you. I find it really comforting to read Lord of the Rings. Yeah. I love the story. Like, it's like a hero's journey. And I like associated with the little hobbits who are like, oh, they haven't got, you know, much going for them, but they changed the world and they saved the world. And that's amazing. And the stories of friendship, I find that really, and I'm not worried about it because I don't think it's real. So I don't care about myths, and stories are great. And they're a great way to understand the world. And I think they're amazing. But when you're saying something that is really real, as in like this table is real, then I want it to be verified by science. And the reason I want it to be verified by science is because science has a method for testing things, and it's open to revision in a way that religion isn't. And I think that is the power of science, and that's why it has been such a good story at explaining our world, because it never claims to have ultimate truth. It has provisional truth.
And that's why it comforts you. So you choose science. And I don't know what the fuck I'm choosing, but I'm definitely like looking at different things, and I do put the things down that don't feel comforting. Yeah. Anyway.
So what's your I've sort of presented the two voices in my head.
Love it.
The one saying he's a fraud, the one saying he's, let's not say crazy, let's say he's crazy in the same way I'm crazy, at least.
Telling tall tales.
He's got some kind of, he's not neurotypical.
Yes. Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that I believe Jonas is best I can. But like I said, what do I think he's saying? I don't know. But I don't think he's making up that he's saying things.
I think talking to you has made me much more sympathetic to him. When I was writing up my notes and trying to make the case for why he's a fraud. I was like, this is airtight. It's clear. It's been so crafted. There's this. Like, I really felt like I got his number. And then talking to you and seeing how you could see exactly the same interactions that I'd seen, but see them so much more sympathetically. I'm like, yeah, okay, so it's probably not an outright liar. But I do think the truth lies somewhere in between those two poles.
I can imagine that. And I like the fact that I can imagine that possibility. That thing of like, I mean, we were discussing it earlier off mic, but lying to ourselves. Yeah. How good we are at that.
It's amazing.
And gosh, that in itself is just such an interesting topic. And I think there are so many more, in a way, interesting topics that this film could have been about.
Yeah. I would love to see another film which was all about the psychology behind what's going on. That would be amazing. And
interviewing other people who are having these experiences.
Yeah. And who interpret them in different ways.
Yeah.
So have some people who believe what they were seeing were real, and then some people who are like, oh, I started seeing things and I went to a psychiatrist and I got medicated and I stopped seeing things.
Yeah. Or people who just deal with it. I've got a friend who kind of, well, it's that empath thing, which back in the day apparently was also known as hysteria. That's what hysteria was.
Wow.
It was usually women, but picking up on like basically the energy or the emotions of the room. Anyway, I've got a friend who does that and just is able to kind of turn it off and turn it on again and just goes through life managing it.
Yeah.
No big deal.
There's a big movement, I think. I'll put it in the show notes. I think it's Hearing Voices, they're called. They might have a website, which is all about dealing with hearing voices specifically, but generally like manifestations of unusual stuff in your perception that would previously probably have been medicated.
Yeah.
And just saying, no, actually, you can just deal with it. If you hear voices, talk back to them. If there's a voice telling you that you're terrible, say, shut up, Dave.
Yeah.
I know, like, and have a dialogue with them. And it doesn't necessarily need to be something that is stigmatized or that is even necessarily has to be got rid of.
Yeah.
It's just something that some people's brains do. So I think that one of the things that really influences this movie is the time and place. It's America. He's from the South and being filmed right now. I wonder what someone having that experience would have. It made a documentary like 20 years ago, and what documentary someone having that same experience would make 20 years into the future. I bet it'd be really different.
Yeah.
Because they'd have a different interpretive lens, obviously, but also the stigma around mental illness hopefully will have changed.
Yes.
So that it would be a whole different kettle of fish.
Indeed.
So what do you think, like, we often try and talk about what potential good things and bad things could come from a documentary or whatever we're talking about. What are your thoughts on this?
Again, I feel like coming back to this comfort theme, if this brought people comfort who are maybe having similar experiences, then that's a good thing. Can I think of bad things? Maybe people who feel like these things exist but who aren't seeing them and who really want to see them, and that makes them sad and disconnected if they're not seeing them.
Why hasn't God chosen me to see these things? Why is it him?
Yeah. Maybe there's a bit of risk there. It depends on somebody's constitution.
Yeah. I don't really see any potential harm. I mean, I'm not super comfortable with the idea of this guy who, you know, has no qualifications or anything, becoming a spiritual counselor on the Oprah Winfrey Network. That doesn't seem like the best idea in the world, but I haven't seen his show. Maybe his advice is great. I do worry about him. I think he needs a skeptic in his life.
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really good for him.
Right to him.
I'm not volunteering, but there must be some, a local skeptics in the pub group or something.
You could have like a skeptical counselling show.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be so good.
Wow. I mean, that's basically what a psychiatrist would do. But yes, I think that's great.
And I probably wouldn't recommend the movie, but I can see, it's well put together. It was an entertaining ride. Yeah. I didn't hate watching it the second time, which is rare for a documentary for me. So
I think if people like films like, What the Bleep and
The Secret,
all of that, this fits in with the library really nicely. It will just kind of feed you more of that goodness.
Yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's feeding you more.
I'm like, oh, it's great. But
it's like that thing that people talk about living in echo chambers, and the way that your search history affects what you get.
Definitely.
It's like that thing of like, if you want to go deeper down this rabbit hole, and I think it's a rabbit hole of delusion mainly. So I'm not sure it's really one that I'd encourage anyone I cared about to go down.
Fair enough.
But yeah. But I did leave. I mean, I left the movie with the two voices. But after talking to you, I feel like I tried really hard to convince you of both of my theories.
Yeah.
But I guess what I was doing was making up stories, right? I was like, imagine this, he's a young boy and he's troubled. Or imagine this, he's a young boy and he wants loads of attention. And imagine this, he needs to boost his career. Imagine this, he's insane with grief. Like, I'm stringing together a story, kind of like a lawyer would string together a story about...
Yeah, here are my cases. Yeah.
But they are just stories. And his movie is just a story too.
Yep.
And one of the problems about stories is we're very convinced by them. Like, we tell stories. Like, human beings love narrative and stories and stuff. And I think it's kind of... What I wanted to do was present two alternative stories that might just make you, like in a courtroom, you would tell another story saying, oh yeah, it looked really bad that he was standing over the guy with a knife. But imagine if he'd just been chopping up, I don't know, like a grapefruit.
Yeah.
And he just came out with the knife. Like, it could have, and then in the jury's mind, there's like this seed of, oh, actually there is another explanation for all the evidence that we've seen. And now there's kind of reasonable doubt. And I don't know how to choose between those stories. That's what I'm trying to do. But in a way, actually, I think it's super unhelpful and unskeptical to do it that way, because the stories are confusing, and if they're good stories, then you'll be convinced whether there's evidence or not. And there's not evidence for any of the stories I've told. They're just my conjecture. So I think anyone watching this, maybe I should rewatch it again a third time. That might be too much. If you just went through and stripped it and bullet pointed everything that was said, and then fact checked everything that was said.
Oh, I mean, you couldn't do it. You'd be left with nothing.
Yeah, that's the thing. You'd be left with nothing. And that's where I end this.
Yeah.
That's my end of my thought process about this movie. I think there's nothing there.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter @SeekerSkeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And you can find my skeptically themed comics at RebeccaOnPaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at Yogis Who Shave on Twitter, and you can find me bringing secular yoga to the masses at yogiswhoshave.com.
If you like what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store.
Or tell somebody you know about the show.
Thanks for listening.
Bye. I think we're getting better every time.